So today we go over the worst countries to live in. And yes, I can basically spell any, UN list that is put out by the worst countries to live in or some list by the mainstream media, but it is the top 10's worst countries in the world to live in. And yeah, the worst countries in the world are here, the worst countries to live in. And there was a lot of bad and good countries in the world. There are good and bad countries. There's always be countries at the bottom of the list, no matter what. No matter if every country's developed, there's always gonna be countries that have disadvantages over others. That's just gonna be a fact of life. So yeah, we'll be going over the worst countries to live in, the worst countries to live in. So here's the countries that you don't want to go to at all. Okay, number one is this is by people's opinions too. So North Korea is the number one worst country in the world. Yeah, and yeah. Here's some of the comments about North Korea, probably one of the worst prison systems, and not the worst at all. Let's talk about the country itself. North Korea is alone is considered a prison, home to the worst concentration camps since the Mr. Mustache Man Germany country went out of commission. And sin. Not the best than 1 million people starve to death every year in North Korea. If you ever visit North Korea, make sure you don't wake up in the morning and think you went to hell and you're still in North Korea. It's probably the best word to describe this as pit. Hell. At least in Syria, Yemen, and Iraq, you can at least possibly live for yourself. But in North Korea, even the slightest word against the leader can get you in jail. Trust me, jail in North Korea is torture. So maybe we'll complain about America's prison system, but then all we have to do is take, North Korea doesn't send you to jail for no reason. And also, your family will also be forced to go to jail as well. At least if you're born in North Korea. If you're just a visitor, they just put you in jail. But if your family ever sets foot, they'll probably put them in jail as well. Number 2 is Somalia. So Somalia, is a country that exists in Africa. Yep, Africa is going to have a lot of this list. No surprise here. Africa is home to some of the least developed and poorest countries in the world. But yeah, they're number 2 worst country. And we all know the meme. Somalia is basically like the Purge in real life. It is basically anarchy, the country. It is still rated as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Well, it's still extremely dangerous. Someone actually said that you should go here, but it'll be very, very, very costly to go here. Basically, as there's a lot of violence and terrorism throughout the whole entire country. Really. And yeah, basically, this is a very, very bad place to go to. And basically, every travel advisory says, don't go here under any costs, unless you're completely insane. So yeah, number 3 is Afghanistan. So Afghanistan, of course, a lot of people say Afghanistan is an okay country. Some that actually visited there. But we all know there's the war in Afghanistan that's been going on for like 10 years. And they are starting to have peace talks with Afghanistan, but don't see violence going away now anytime soon. Afghanistan is we all know Afghanistan is like Somalia, has been at war since the 90s. But Afghanistan has been at war since the 80s. It's all because of the Soviet Union. Yeah. Yep. It's because of them Afghanistan is basically at war. Because the Soviet Union wanted to install their own government. But they have a lot of extremist groups in Afghanistan. Like the Taliban, the other terrorist group that must not be named, and of course other groups as well. And yeah, no surprise Afghanistan ranks so high on this list. No freedom to religion at all, either. Here as well. Here. And also Afghanistan is very, very mean to women as well. So Afghanistan's not a good place to go to. And it's not a good place to live either. Number four is Iraq, another Muslim country. What are these Muslim countries and not being good places to live? Iraq is the third Muslim country in the world on the list. And no surprise, Iraq is basically another place with mostly war and mostly another place sexist and racist place. Basically, there's a lot of religious fanatics in Iraq, a lot of dangerous people in Iraq, and yeah, it's another place that you shouldn't want to go to under any costs, and a place that you shouldn't live in at all costs. Yo, yo. Number five is Syria, another place, more war. Syria is basically has been in civil war since 2011, and it shows no signs of going away anytime soon. They are actually starting to get rid of the civil war, but the violence in Syria is not going to go away anytime soon. And yeah, Syria is just basically very dangerous and not a good place to go to, and hasn't been since 2011. Number six is another Muslim nation. I don't know what's a Muslim nations and being horrible places to live. But number six is Pakistan. Pakistan is Pakistan. Pakistan is basically one of the most hated countries in the world because of how dangerous some of the countries is. Here. And people are saying they have, electricity problems. There are also there's some mean people altogether in Pakistan. And but yeah, it's not really. A lot of people just don't like this country. Next is Sudan. Sudan, no surprise, is on this list. It basically is a very, very, very corrupt country. Probably even more corrupt than its southern neighbor. Its leader until his death was basically on the world criminals list. He was basically a wanted international criminal. Not many people are really wanted international criminals, but the leader of Sudan somehow accomplished that. And basically, it's one of the worst countries in the world. It is one of the most restrictive and most vile countries in the world. And that was because of their previous leader, Omar. I don't know his name, but I think his name starts with Omar. But he is considered one of the worst leaders of all time. Number 8 is the second non-Muslim country on the list, and that is China. China is because of the government of China. The government of China is basically one of the most hated governments in the world because its government basically it's basically turned to America's government where they want to hover their nose into everything. And it seems that a second Cold War is also brewing. But also, China is far worse than America by many people. It is because they have a one-child policy for a while. Now it's a three-child policy because they realize the disastrous effects of that. And also the treatment of certain groups in Eastern China. No, not. In Western China is not really too good either. And a lot of people do not really like Chinese companies either, such as TikTok and Huawei. And a lot of people hate that Hollywood and American companies are making agreements with China. Number 9 is Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is hated because of the one infamous leader, basically, he basically turned Zimbabwe into a failed state. And basically, after finally he retired, and he was like 96 years old or something, he finally just retired and they finally got a new government. Zimbabwe has improved since then, but a lot of people still remember Zimbabwe from Mugabe. And yeah, Mugabe was the leader for basically like 40 years, and he turned the country into a hyperinflation, horrendous place to live in. So yeah, number 10 is Yemen. Yemen is on this list because the country is in a civil war. Just like the other countries in the list, it's actually It's just weird that 7 out of the 10 countries on the list are Muslim countries, and that's because a lot of these countries are basically in civil wars or civil conflicts, or have a high rate of terrorism for some reason, or just have bad governments like Sudan and Pakistan. But Yemen is basically in the civil war, and that's why the reason why it's on the list. Number 11, Central African Republic. Central African Republic is a country in Africa, and it is the first. It's surprisingly not. And yeah, countries like Africa are not going to leave these lists anytime soon. This is another country that's been in civil war basically since forever, and basically it's just another very poor and horrendous place to go to because of all the war. Number 12 is the Congo. This is a country I'm not surprised is not in the top 10 yet. The Congo is basically one of the poorest countries in the world. And yeah, the Congo is basically a very corrupt country, and a lot of people are poor and don't really know what's about the outside world because it's just the government is basically just a very bad government, and also that people don't really get money either. They also so it also has one of the highest rates of child labor in the world, which is pretty sad. Number 14 is Italy. Yep, Italy is the first European country on the list. I'm shocked it isn't Russia or Ukraine. But Italy, yep, a lot of people hate Italy, basically. A lot of people say a lot of people just hate Italy. I just don't know why. A lot of people hate Italy for being racist, violent, and wild, the first person said. But a lot of people even say Italy's a third world country, barely attached to Europe by its twist of fate. Yep. Number 14 is India. Well, India is a country that a lot of people hate. And India is also not a very good place to live. It also has gotten worse in 2021 with the Delta variant of COVID-19. But a lot of people do not like India because of overpopulation. India just has too many people. Number 15, and yeah, other reasons why people hate India is the of course caste system and the racism and the divide between the country, between its minorities and between its religious minorities and its religious majorities. So yeah, there we go. Number 15 is Burma. Burma is just not a good place to go to. Burma has been at war since 1948. Yep, 1948. And Burma is basically a very racist country. And it's basically how they treat Muslims. If you're a Muslim, Burma should be on the last place to go to, besides North Korea and China. Burma is basically considered the worst country for Muslims in the world, besides of course North Korea and China, which treat Muslims just as bad now in both of those countries. Basically, if you practice Islam, Burma is not a place to go to at all. It is a horrendous place to go to. And it's just for anybody. There's still a lot of violence, there's still a lot of war, and a lot of violent extremists in Burma. Number 16 is South Sudan, another sub-Saharan African country on the list. It is another very poor and impoverished country thanks to the country's government. The country's government, again, is the country has been at civil war since the country's independence, which was 2011. Since then, it's the least developed country in the world, and the government could care less about its citizens, because basically the prime minister is basically making everything worse. Because the government basically is doing nothing for the people and too worried about fighting against each other. And most countries said, nah, do not go to South Sudan. South Sudan is not as well on the list because it's a lesser known country. Nobody really knows South Sudan exists. It's a country that nobody cares about. And yeah, a lot of people just forget South Sudan exists, other than being the newest country. And also, it has a long way to go to be not a poor country at all. And yeah, South Sudan is just a very corrupt country in Africa, just like the rest of these countries, like the Congo and others. Number 17 is Saudi Arabia. Yep, another Muslim country is on the list. Soccer there. Saudi Arabia is basically hated because of its government. Saudi Arabia has one of the worst treatments for women in the world. Women weren't even allowed to drive until recent years. Yep, they weren't even allowed to drive. Now they can drive, but they can only drive when a male is with them. So it's still extremely strict. Basically, women don't really have any rights in Saudi Arabia, but and that's why people hate Saudi Arabia. And although Saudi Arabia also supports wars throughout the Middle East, they're kind of like the big bully of the Middle East. So no wonder why they hate. No wonder why they're hated on this list. They're also very racist towards non-Muslims as well. Basically treated them like garbage. So yeah, Saudi Arabia is on the worst countries. Number 18 is Venezuela. I'm shocked Venezuela is only at 18. Venezuela has gone massively downhill throughout the past decade or so. Surprised that Venezuela is as high as it is. No, not high, is as low as it is. Venezuela has basically the government has basically spiraled out of control and basically now just rigs elections so they can always win, which is just not a good place to go to. The fact that Venezuela's government is basically disputed as a whole because the government does not really do anything correctly, it does more proof that this country is just another failed state in South America. Or it's the only failed state in South America. It is the only Latin American country probably on this list. And Venezuela is very hard to get food. And it is also the second example of hyperinflation in a nation. Because of failed government policies. It also does prove that socialism is just a failed system as a whole. No one wants to live in a country with a failed system, and socialism is thus that. No wonder why people hate Venezuela so much, because socialism, again, is nothing but a failed system. And failed system it is because no one wants to live in Venezuela. Well, no one is begging to come to Venezuela. So yeah, that is it about Venezuela. And Venezuela also has one of the highest crime rates in the world. Number 19 is Chad. A lot of people are making memes, you know, about Chad, but Chad is basically, yeah. And yeah, Chad is just another country with lots of shambles and basically civil war and poverty. It's another place in Africa that most people forgot about if it wasn't for the memes. And yeah, Chad is basically just in shambles, and the government is just not good government, bad government. And number 20 is Israel. Yeah, we're not going to talk about why people hate Israel. You can guess the reason why in the past history. Number 21, Iran. Iran is basically one of the most evil. It's basically the other bully of the Middle East. Iran has good history, but Iranian government is basically very much just as strict or even just as bad as Saudi Arabia. Women have basically no rights in Iran, and of course, gays. And also let's not forget, gays don't have rights in Iran either. The same thing could be part of the whole Middle East except for Israel. Israel seems to be the only country that actually cares about gays and women's rights. So yeah, Iran is at number 21. Number 22 is Niger. Niger is basically another very poor and basically corrupt country. It has the lowest development of the Human Development Index. Basically, it is the most illiterate country in the world. And basically, the corruption government, like most of Africa, is just extremely corrupt. Number 23 is Poland, the second European country on the list. Surprised that Poland is higher than Russia. Considering that a lot of people hate Russia, yep, Poland is considered worse. A lot of people hate Poland because Poland is basically a very racist and country in Europe, which isn't surprising because Poland does not like outsiders. And that's because of their history of being invaded by other countries. Basically, yeah, a lot of people hate Poland, basically, for some reason. Next is Cuba. Cuba, there's currently protests in Cuba, but Cuba is on this list because it's just communism. It's basically because crime, corruption, violence, and poverty. And also there's no civil rights or liberty, which describes most of these countries on the list, maybe except for Italy and Poland. Number 25 is Russia. There we go, Russia's on the list. Russia is the 25th worst country in the world to live in according to the top 10s. Living in Russia, what a nightmare. And a lot of the cities are bad. Imagine living among drunken, ugly, primitive boys, who have no respect for each other, and have a rampant attention towards foreigners. Imagine living in a place with corruption and crime rates surpass some of the worst African countries. And yeah, A lot of people hate Russia because it was America's like worst enemy besides China. And yeah, no wonder why they're on the list. And that is the top. And now let's get to the last 5 countries on the list. Number 26 is Uzbekistan. Yep, Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan is considered the worst country in the world to live in. I would put it in second place after Afghanistan. Very poor economy, forced favors, roads, crazy drivers, and worse net income. Bureaucracy and super dictators. Number 27, another country that must not be named. Number 28 is Macedonia. Yep, this is mostly from Greek people hated Macedonia because of the name. It was changed to North Macedonia, and now Greece is apparently all. And now Greece finally said, "Yep, you guys get to exist now." But yep. But also, basically, Macedonia is also a very poor country and one of the poorest countries in Europe as well. Number 29 is, I'm surprised this country is not much higher. It's not higher than 29. Nigeria. Nigeria is basically a very overpopulated, crowded place. It has a very corrupt government. It's very unsafe. The Nigerians are so dumb when it comes to economic decisions. They have everything in front of them. Oil refineries, gold, and diamonds. Yet we can't become stable because they're so stupid and corrupt. And the streets are full of gangs, drug dealers, terrorists, and bandits and thieves. And northern Nigeria, if you're gay, yeah, get out of there. Number 30 is the last country on the list, and that is Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine is hated because of course, the war in Donbass, but also because of how corrupt the government is in Ukraine. Ukraine is probably just as corrupt as Russia is. And the climate is not that great in Ukraine either. And also, Ukraine is very, very bad in terms of salaries and stuff as well. And yeah. And now we got the honorable mentions. Vatican City, Angola, Bangladesh, there's Somaliland, which is and Sri Lanka, Hungary, Turkmenistan, Burundi, Libya, and Australia. Maybe we talk to those politicians about America being the worst place to live in. Because about Democrats saying America is one of the worst places to live in. Because according to the top 10s, America is not even in the top 40. I don't even think the top 50. I can go to the bottom list here. And according to people, where does America rank on this list? Well, America ranks 189 on this list. So, yeah. And unless you live in, of course, Detroit or Baltimore, America is probably one of the safest countries in the world. Basically. Agree. And yeah, America is at 189. So, yep, AOC. America isn't one of the most dangerous countries in the world, where everybody around the world wants to come here. And yeah, most of these places are much higher than America. But on the bright side, a lot of these countries are trying to improve. Yep, are trying to improve. Especially some of these countries on the list. And some of these countries are actually considered pretty developed already. Australia and Italy being in the top 50 worst countries. Australia is only probably on the list because of the dangerous animals and bugs there. I bet besides the dangerous animals and bugs in Australia, Australia is probably a pretty good place to live in. And yeah, that's basically it about this video. Goodbye.